Welcome to Boring History and Stories. Thank you for being here. On this channel, history is told slowly and calmly. These are long, unhurried stories meant for relaxed listening. Whether you're winding down at the end of the day, resting quietly, or preparing to fall asleep. If you enjoy thoughtful, peaceful history like this, you're welcome to subscribe for more long-form stories about civilizations, empires, and the ancient world. Tonight, we're going back further than kings and empires, further than written law, further even than recorded memory. We're going back to the place where history itself quietly began. This is the story of Mesopotamia, long before there were borders or nations, before crowns or capitals. There was land shaped almost entirely by water. Two rivers flowed through a wide, open plain, the Tigris and the Euphrates. They did not flow gently or predictably. Some years they flooded just enough to nourish the soil. Other years they arrived violently, washing away homes and fields. But when the waters receded, they left behind something rare and powerful: fertile land. In a world where survival depended entirely on the land's generosity, this mattered more than anything else. People came slowly at first. Small groups settled near the riverbanks. They built shelters from mud and reeds. They learned when to plant and when to harvest. They learned which floods could be survived and which could not. Life here was not easy. The climate was harsh. Summers were unforgiving. Floods destroyed as often as they sustained. There were no mountains for protection, no forests for shelter. And yet people stayed, because here, for the first time, life could grow beyond survival. As generations passed, something subtle began to happen. Farming improved. Tools became more effective. Irrigation channels were dug to guide water, rather than simply endure it. Crops grew more reliably. Surplus food appeared, not every year, but often enough to change the rhythm of life. When people no longer had to spend every moment finding food, time itself changed. Some people stopped farming. They became builders, potters, weavers, traders, priests. Villages grew larger. Paths became streets. Homes clustered together. And eventually, without a single moment marking the change, villages became cities. One of the earliest was Uruk. Uruk did not look like a modern city. There were no towers of glass, no paved roads, but it was large, dense, and alive. Thousands of people lived within its walls. Its center was dominated by a massive temple complex, a ziggurat, rising step by step toward the sky. The temple was not just religious. It was administrative. Priests controlled food storage. They managed labor. They organized festivals, rituals, and offerings. In a world governed by gods believed to control floods and fate, religious authority and political power were inseparable. The gods of Mesopotamia were not comforting figures. They were unpredictable. They argued, punished, tested, and demanded obedience. Humans believed they existed to serve the gods, not the other way around. This belief shaped everything. Disasters were seen as divine messages. Floods meant anger. Droughts meant neglect. Life carried an underlying sense of unease, a quiet awareness that order could collapse at any time. To manage this uncertainty, people turned to structure. Rules emerged naturally. Who owned land? Who owed labor? Who paid tribute? But memory could not hold all of this. As cities grew, the need to record became unavoidable, and so one of the most important transformations in human history took place. Quietly, without ceremony, people began pressing marks into wet clay. At first, these marks represented objects, grain, sheep, tools. Over time, they represented sounds and ideas. This system became cuneiform. It was not invented to tell stories. It was invented to keep track, to remember, to make promises permanent. For the first time, human thought could exist outside the human mind. History could now begin. Writing changed power forever. Those who could read and write controlled records, laws, and communication. Scribes became essential. Knowledge gathered in temples and palaces. Authority no longer depended only on strength. It depended on documentation. Cities began to compete more fiercely. Each city had its own god. Each city claimed divine favor. Each city defended its territory. Walls were built, armies organized, diplomacy emerged. Mesopotamia became a landscape of rivalry, yet it was also a place of extraordinary creativity. The Sumerians, among the earliest inhabitants, developed mathematics, astronomy, and literature. They created epic poems, including stories about floods and heroes that would echo through later civilizations. Time itself was measured differently here. The base 60 system, still used today for minutes and hours, was developed in Mesopotamia. The movement of stars was observed and recorded. People believed the heavens reflected the will of the gods. Night skies mattered. As centuries passed, new powers rose. The Akkadians, under Sargon, united city-states into something entirely new, an empire. For the first time, distant cities were ruled by a single authority. Different cultures were governed together. This idea would never disappear. Empires, once imagined, became inevitable. Life for ordinary people continued quietly beneath these shifts. Most people were farmers. They rose with the sun, worked the land, paid taxes in grain, worshipped local gods, lived close to family. Homes were simple, often 1 or 2 rooms. Streets were narrow. Cities smelled of earth, animals, smoke, and life. At night, oil lamps glowed softly. Families shared meals. Stories were told. Prayers were whispered, not for greatness, but for survival. Later came the Babylonians. Under them, law took physical form. King Hammurabi ordered laws carved into stone and displayed publicly. These laws defined marriage, trade, punishment, and responsibility. Justice was harsh, but it was consistent. For the first time, people knew what the rules were. Still later, the Assyrians rose to power. They ruled through military strength, fear, and efficiency. Their armies were disciplined, their cities heavily fortified. Yet they also built libraries, preserved knowledge, and recorded history in detail. Mesopotamia was never one story. It was layers upon layers of civilization, built, destroyed, and rebuilt. Cities fell, others rose nearby. Rivers kept flowing, floods kept coming. People adapted. Generation after generation lived ordinary lives in an extraordinary place, unaware that they were laying the foundations for everything that would follow. Government, writing, law, cities, empires, all of it began here. Mesopotamia was not peaceful. It was not perfect. But it was where humanity first learned how to live together in large numbers and how to remember itself. As the sun rose over the flat plains of Mesopotamia, light spread slowly across the land. There were no mountains to block it, no forests to soften it. Morning arrived openly, revealing fields, canals, and clusters of mud brick buildings pressed closely together. This was the beginning of another ordinary day in one of the world's first cities. From a distance, the city appeared almost to grow out of the earth itself. Its walls were the color of the soil. Its houses were shaped by the same mud that lined the riverbanks. Smoke drifted upward from cooking fires as families began to wake. Inside the city, life stirred quietly. A farmer rose before the heat became unbearable. He stepped outside into the narrow street, the ground still cool beneath his feet. He would spend the day tending fields beyond the walls, guiding water through irrigation channels dug by hand and maintained by the community. Water was everything here. Canals crisscrossed the land like veins, bringing life to crops that could not survive without them. These channels required constant care. If one collapsed or clogged, fields dried. If water flowed too freely, floods destroyed homes. Managing water was not an individual task. It was communal. This necessity shaped Mesopotamian society in profound ways. Cooperation was no longer optional. Survival depended on shared labor, shared rules, and shared responsibility. Back inside the city, artisans began their work. A potter shaped clay on a simple wheel, hands moving with practiced ease. Each vessel would store grain, oil, or water, essential for survival. Nearby, a weaver worked at a loom, threads stretched tight, creating cloth for clothing or trade. Markets slowly filled. Merchants laid out goods on woven mats. Barley, dates, wool, tools, and pottery were exchanged. Trade extended beyond the city's walls. Mesopotamia lacked stone, timber, and metal, so merchants traveled far to obtain them. Donkeys carried goods along dusty roads. Boats moved along the rivers, connecting cities hundreds of miles apart. Trade brought not only materials, but ideas. Languages mixed, customs blended. News traveled slowly but steadily. Above the city, the ziggurat loomed. The temple dominated everything. It was visible from every street, a constant reminder of the god's presence. Priests climbed its steps daily, bringing offerings of food, drink, and incense. Rituals were performed to appease deities believed to control floods, fertility, and fate. Religion was not separate from life. It was life. People believed the gods had created humans to serve them. Work, worship, and obedience were intertwined. Even kings ruled not by personal authority alone, but by divine approval. Inside the temple complex, scribes sat quietly, pressing symbols into wet clay. These tablets recorded everything. Who owed grain? Who delivered sheep? Who worked on the canals? Writing was not poetic here. It was practical. It was power. A scribe's work could decide disputes, settle debts, or record punishment. Literacy was rare, and those who possessed it held influence far beyond their physical strength. Families lived simply. Homes were built close together, sharing walls. Rooms were small, designed to keep out heat. Roofs were flat, often used as sleeping areas on hot nights. Privacy was limited. Life was communal by necessity. Children learned early. They fetched water, helped with chores, learned trades from parents. Formal education existed mainly for future scribes and priests. Most knowledge was passed through observation and repetition. At night, the city changed. The heat faded, lamps flickered, people gathered on rooftops or in courtyards. Stories were told about gods, floods, heroes, and kings. These stories carried warnings and lessons, shaped by a world where nature was unpredictable and power often cruel. Fear was a constant companion. Floods could come suddenly. Disease spread easily. War between cities was frequent. Walls offered protection, but never certainty. This uncertainty shaped Mesopotamian law. When disputes arose, they were brought before officials or priests. Justice was public. Punishments were harsh by modern standards, but they were consistent. The goal was order, not mercy. Under Babylonian rule, this system became formalized. Hammurabi's laws were carved into stone and displayed for all to see. They governed marriage, trade, inheritance, and crime. The laws reflected a society deeply concerned with balance and responsibility, though not equality. Social hierarchy was rigid. Nobles, commoners, and enslaved people lived under different rules. Rights and punishments varied by status. This inequality was accepted as part of the natural order. Still, within these limits, life continued. Festivals punctuated the year. Music played. Dances were performed. Offerings were made to celebrate good harvests or seek protection from disaster. People married, raised children, and mourned their dead. Death was not romanticized. Mesopotamians believed the afterlife was bleak, a shadowy existence beneath the earth. This belief made life more precious, more urgent. Joy was found in the present, not postponed for eternity. As centuries passed, cities rose and fell. Uruk declined. Ur rose. Akkad flourished, then faded. Babylon emerged. Assyria conquered. Each civilization built upon the remains of the last. Walls were rebuilt, temples repaired, streets reused. Mesopotamia was never erased. It was layered. Through it all, ordinary people continued to live their lives, largely unaware that they were shaping the foundation of civilization itself. They were not thinking about legacy. They were thinking about tomorrow's water supply, tomorrow's harvest, tomorrow's safety. And yet, through these small daily concerns, something extraordinary took shape. The idea that humans could live together in large communities, that rules could govern behavior, that writing could preserve memory. The city, once an experiment, became permanent. As night settles again over Mesopotamia, the rivers continue their slow movement through the dark. Lamps flicker out one by one. The city sleeps, and in its quiet, the foundations of history remain. As centuries passed in Mesopotamia, life within the cities grew more structured, more complex, and more fragile. What began as cooperation around water and survival slowly transformed into something heavier: power. At first, leadership in Mesopotamian cities was practical. Someone had to organize labor. Someone had to coordinate irrigation repairs. Someone had to settle disputes. These leaders were often priests or elders, chosen because they understood ritual, tradition, and negotiation. But as cities grew wealthier, leadership changed. Temples stored surplus grain. Workshops produced valuable goods. Trade routes expanded. With wealth came inequality, and with inequality came ambition. Cities began to look outward, not just inward. They wanted land, they wanted water, they wanted security, and so conflict became a regular part of life. Early wars were small. Raids over farmland, disputes over canals. Retaliation followed retaliation. Walls grew taller. Weapons improved. Armies became more organized. From this environment, kingship emerged. A king was not just a leader. He was a protector, a judge, and a representative of the gods. His authority was believed to come from divine favor. Victory in battle was proof of approval. Defeat was a sign of displeasure. Kings built monuments to reinforce this belief. They carved their victories into stone. They commissioned statues. They dedicated temples. Power needed to be seen, to be believed. One of the earliest figures to reshape Mesopotamia was Sargon of Akkad. Before Sargon, cities ruled themselves. After him, they answered to an empire. Sargon united city-states under one authority, conquering rivals and placing loyal governors in charge. His empire stretched across Mesopotamia, binding diverse cultures together under a single rule. This idea that one ruler could govern many cities changed history forever. Empires, once formed, became the standard. Life under empire was different. Local traditions remained, but ultimate authority lay elsewhere. Taxes flowed upward. Soldiers marched farther from home. Loyalty shifted from city gods to imperial kings. For ordinary people, empire brought mixed consequences. Roads improved. Trade expanded. Stability increased in some regions. In others, conscription and taxation intensified hardship. The balance between order and oppression was delicate. After the Akkadian Empire declined, new powers rose from its remains. Babylon emerged slowly, built on law rather than sheer force. Under Hammurabi, Babylon became a center of administration and justice. His laws reflected a society deeply concerned with order. They defined responsibility, property, and punishment in precise terms. Hammurabi did not claim to invent justice. He claimed to restore it. This distinction mattered. Law was presented as timeless, divinely sanctioned, not personal whim. The king was the guardian of order, not its creator. Yet law alone could not protect Babylon forever. To the north, another power grew, the Assyrians. Assyria was shaped by conflict. Its land was less fertile. Resources were scarcer. Survival demanded strength. Assyrian kings built one of the most disciplined military systems the ancient world had seen. Their armies trained relentlessly. Their tactics were efficient and often brutal. They conquered through fear, but also through organization. Cities fell before them. Territories expanded. The Assyrian Empire stretched across Mesopotamia and beyond. Yet even the Assyrians understood the importance of knowledge. They built libraries, preserved texts, recorded history meticulously. King Ashurbanipal's library became one of the greatest collections of written works in the ancient world. This paradox defined Mesopotamia: violence and learning, destruction and preservation, empire and memory. Life for common people remained focused on survival. Fields were planted, canals repaired, children raised, festivals celebrated, empires rose above them, but daily routines endured. Still, the weight of empire pressed down, taxes increased, soldiers were drafted, labor was demanded for construction projects. The distance between rulers and ruled widened. Over time, cracks appeared. Empires stretched thin. Internal rebellions flared. Rivals exploited weakness. Cities that once dominated the land fell into ruin. Babylon declined. Assyria collapsed. New powers arrived, Persians, then others, each inheriting the systems Mesopotamia had created. The land itself changed. Rivers shifted course. Soil salinized from over-irrigation. Fields grew less productive. Environmental strain compounded political collapse. Cities were abandoned. Temples crumbled. Streets filled with sand. Yet Mesopotamia never vanished. Its ideas survived. Writing spread across civilizations. Law codes inspired future systems. Kingship models influenced empires from Persia to Rome. Even concepts of time, astronomy, and governance traced their roots to this land. Mesopotamia faded from prominence, but not from history. Its people did not know they were building the foundation of the world. They simply lived, they adapted, they endured. As night settles again over the ancient plains, the rivers continue their slow journey. The cities sleep, some silent, some buried, some remembered only in clay tablets. But the story they began still flows. Every city that followed, every empire that rose, every law that governed people, all carried echoes of this first world. Mesopotamia did not end. It became part of everything. As generations passed across Mesopotamia, the world between the rivers settled into patterns that felt eternal. Cities rose, walls crumbled, rulers changed, but belief endured. For the people of Mesopotamia, the world was never silent. Every sound carried meaning. The wind across the plains, the murmur of water in canals, the distant call of animals, all were reminders that unseen forces shaped daily life. The gods were everywhere. They were not distant creators watching from above. They were present in storms, in sickness, in harvests, and in dreams. Each god held dominion over a part of existence: the sky, the earth, water, fertility, war, wisdom. People did not expect kindness from the gods. They expected attention. To be noticed by the gods was dangerous, but to be ignored was worse. Temples stood at the center of every city. Their walls were thick, their steps worn smooth by centuries of ritual. Inside, priests moved quietly through incense and shadow. Offerings were prepared carefully: bread, beer, fruit, animals, all chosen to please divine tastes. Rituals followed precise instructions. A mistake could offend a god. An incorrect word could invite disaster. Priests memorized prayers passed down through generations. Some prayers asked for protection. Others begged forgiveness for unknown sins. Mistakes committed unknowingly, yet still dangerous. People feared accidental guilt. Illness, in particular, was believed to be divine punishment. When someone fell sick, families did not ask what caused it. They asked which god was angry. Healers combined medicine with magic. Herbs were applied. Incantations were spoken. Amulets were worn. Recovery meant divine mercy. Death meant divine judgment. though its reason was often unclear. Dreams mattered deeply. People believed God spoke through dreams. A troubling dream could signal danger ahead. A peaceful dream could bring reassurance. Priests interpreted symbols, water, fire, animals, translating the language of the divine into human understanding. Time itself felt sacred. Days were divided carefully. Months followed lunar cycles. Festivals marked important transitions: planting, harvest, renewal. Each ritual reinforced order in a chaotic world. Astronomers watched the sky nightly. Stars were mapped, planets tracked, eclipses feared. The heavens were believed to reflect the will of the gods. A strange alignment could signal war. A darkened moon could mean a king's death. Nothing was random. Because of this worldview, Mesopotamians lived with a quiet tension, a constant awareness that balance could be lost at any moment. This tension shaped how people approached life. Joy was celebrated intensely. Feasts were loud. Music filled streets during festivals. Dancers performed for gods and people alike. Life was fragile, and pleasure was not postponed. Marriage was practical but emotional. Families arranged unions to secure stability, yet affection was valued. Letters between spouses revealed tenderness, concern, longing. Children were cherished, but survival was never guaranteed. Infant mortality was high. Parents prayed constantly for protection. Small charms were tied to cradles. Names were chosen carefully, often invoking divine favor. Aging was respected. Elders carried memory. They remembered floods, wars, famines. Their stories taught caution. Wisdom came not from books alone, but from endurance. Death, however, cast a long shadow. Mesopotamians believed the afterlife was a dull, dusty existence beneath the earth. Souls wandered in darkness, sustained only by offerings left by the living. There was no paradise, no reward for righteousness. This belief made death final and frightening. Funeral rites were careful and solemn. Bodies were buried with goods, pottery, jewelry, food, not for comfort, but for remembrance. Families poured libations for ancestors, hoping to ease their existence beyond life. To be forgotten was the greatest fear. This fear shaped one of Mesopotamia's greatest achievements: recorded memory. Clay tablets preserved names, contracts, prayers, stories. Kings ordered their deeds inscribed so future generations would remember them. Cities recorded their existence so they would not vanish entirely. Among these texts was the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, a powerful king, searched desperately for immortality after losing his closest companion. He failed, but in failing, he learned something essential. Humans cannot escape death, but they can leave traces: walls, stories, cities. This lesson echoed across Mesopotamian culture. As centuries passed, new empires inherited this ancient land. Persian rulers governed with tolerance, preserving temples and traditions. Greek conquerors arrived with curiosity and ambition. Alexander the Great walked through Babylon, dreaming of empire, surrounded by ruins older than any story he knew. Even he could not stop time. Slowly, Mesopotamia changed. Canals filled with silt, rivers shifted, trade routes moved, cities emptied quietly. No final battle marked the end, just absence. Wind moved through abandoned streets. Sand covered walls. Clay tablets slept beneath the earth. For thousands of years, Mesopotamia rested in silence until memory returned. Archaeologists uncovered cities, scholars translated tablets, names spoken for the first time in millennia returned to the world. Uruk, Ur, Babylon. History remembered itself. And through that remembrance, humanity recognized something profound. Everything familiar, cities, laws, writing, timekeeping, began here. Not perfectly, not peacefully, but decisively. As night falls once more over the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates continue their ancient paths. They flow without concern for kings or empires. They flowed before memory. They will flow after it. And somewhere beneath their waters and soil, the quiet beginnings of civilization remain, patient, enduring, and still shaping the world. As this story comes to a close, the land between the rivers grows quiet once more. The cities that once stood here have faded into the earth. Their walls have fallen. Their temples have crumbled. The voices of the people who lived, worked, loved, and feared beneath the Mesopotamian sky are long gone. And yet, they are not lost. Their ideas still move through the world. Every city that followed carries echoes of their first streets. Every law reflects their earliest attempts at order. Every written word traces back to the moment someone pressed a mark into wet clay, hoping to remember. Mesopotamia was not meant to last forever. It was meant to begin something. As the rivers continue their slow, patient journey through the land, they carry with them the memory of humanity's first steps towards civilization. If you're listening as you rest or prepare to sleep, let this story settle gently, like the flow of water returning to its course. Stay here a little longer, in the land between the rivers. There is no need to move forward yet. Time in this place does not rush. It unfolds slowly, quietly, without urgency. The land has learned patience over thousands of years, and it offers that patience freely to anyone willing to remain. Imagine the city once more, not as a capital or a symbol, but simply as a place where people live. The walls still stand, though their edges are softened by age. Some stones have shifted slightly, settling into new positions over time. Cracks appear, not suddenly, but gradually, the way wrinkles form on a familiar face. The streets are quieter now, but not empty. Footsteps pass occasionally. A cart rolls by, its wooden wheels turning slowly, creaking softly against the packed earth. A voice calls out briefly, then fades. Life continues in fragments, not crowds. Morning arrives without ceremony. Light spreads across rooftops and courtyards, revealing the gentle disorder of lived-in spaces. Jars rest against walls. Tools lean where they were left the night before. Cloth hangs to dry, stirred slightly by the breeze. People wake in their own time. Some rise early, guided by habit rather than necessity. Others linger, listening to the sounds of the city before joining it. There is no great signal that begins the day. It begins naturally, piece by piece. Water is drawn carefully. Hands lower buckets into wells or canals, lifting them slowly, mindful not to spill what is precious. Water is poured into vessels, measured out, shared. Nothing is wasted. Everything has a place. Meals are simple. Bread is broken, not cut. Dates are eaten slowly. Conversation is quiet, unforced. Families sit together without distraction, without haste. There is time to notice one another's expressions, to listen fully. Work resumes, as it always has. Fields outside the walls receive their caretakers. The soil is examined, touched, adjusted. Water is guided gently through channels carved generations ago. The canals remember where to flow. They do not question their purpose. Inside the city, crafts continue. A potter turns clay with steady hands, the wheel spinning at a pace set long ago by muscle memory. Each vessel emerges gradually, shaped by pressure and patience. Nothing is hurried. A rushed pot cracks later. A scribe sits quietly, pressing symbols into clay. His movements are careful, deliberate. Each mark matters. What is written may be read long after he is gone. Writing slows time. It asks the writer to pause, to consider, to choose words carefully. It preserves moments that would otherwise fade. In this way, memory becomes physical. Nearby, a teacher speaks softly to a small group of students. Lessons are repeated again and again, not because they are difficult, but because repetition is how knowledge settles. Learning here is not fast, it is thorough. Midday brings stillness. The heat presses down gently but persistently. Movement slows. Doors close part way. Activity retreats into shade. The city breathes quietly, conserving energy. This pause is not laziness. It is adaptation. People understand their environment deeply. They move with it, not against it. Survival has taught them when to act and when to rest. As afternoon passes, life stirs again. Children play in small groups, their laughter echoing briefly before dissolving into the air. Games require little: stones, sticks, imagination. Their world is bounded by walls they do not question. They grow up surrounded by age. Old buildings, old stories, old customs. Time feels layered here. In the temples, rituals continue. Incense rises in thin streams. Prayers are spoken softly, often without full understanding of their origins. Some words are older than the city itself, yet they are spoken anyway, out of respect, out of habit, out of hope. Faith has changed over generations. It is no longer driven entirely by fear. It is quieter now, more familiar. The gods are still present, but less overwhelming. They are part of life's background, like the rivers or the sky. Evening arrives slowly. The light softens. Shadows lengthen. The city gathers itself again. Meals are prepared. Lamps are lit. Families assemble on rooftops or in courtyards to catch the cooling air. Stories are told. Some are old, passed down so often that details blur, but the shape remains. Others are recent, drawn from lived experience. Stories help make sense of change. They give continuity to a world that never stands still. The stars appear one by one. Astronomers once mapped these skies carefully, believing them to hold messages. Now, people simply observe them, familiar and constant. The heavens feel less threatening, more reassuring. Night deepens. Sounds fade gradually. Lamps are extinguished. The city grows still, but not lifeless. Breathing continues. Dreams begin. Outside the walls, the land stretches into darkness. The rivers move quietly, reflecting fragments of starlight. Their banks shift slowly over time, reshaping the land without effort. They have always done this. They will continue to do so. The land remembers more than people do. It holds impressions of countless lives, footsteps pressed into soil, foundations buried beneath newer ones, fragments of pottery scattered across forgotten rooms. Nothing here is truly gone. It rests. Time moves forward without erasing what came before. Years pass, generations change. The city grows quieter still. Some buildings fall into disuse. Others remain occupied, though by fewer people. Repairs are made less often. Paint fades, stone erodes. No one announces decline. It simply happens. Life adapts again. Those who remain alive more slowly, more thoughtfully. They know what has been lost, but they also know what endures. The land still provides. The rivers still flow. Memory becomes more important than ambition. Elders speak more often now, aware that their stories may not be repeated forever. They choose words carefully. They pause between sentences. Silence becomes part of speech. Younger listeners absorb what they can, though they do not yet understand its weight. Night after night, the same rhythms continue. Light, work, rest, sleep. Time stretches. Eventually, the city will fall silent, but not suddenly, not violently, quietly. And when it does, the land will not resist. It will accept the structures back into itself. Walls will soften, streets will disappear, names will fade, yet the beginning remains. The idea of living together, the idea of recording memory, the idea of order emerging from cooperation. These ideas move forward, carried by people who no longer remember where they began. And as this story finally slows toward rest, there is nothing left to do. Nothing to hold on to. Let the details fade gently. Let the images soften. Let the land return to stillness. History has finished speaking. Thank you for being here and for sharing this quiet moment of history. Good night.